Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to viewers on this. And today our special guest on Lessons from Lockdown is Duncan Wallace, coming all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Hi, welcome, Duncan, and nice to have you on the Contact Centre Showcase.
Thank you. I think good morning there, good evening here.
Excellent. Just a very quick introduction. Duncan is no stranger to South Africa since '95. Be living out here, and some might remember Duncan as COO of Merchants back in the day of 2004 to 2006, and to some extent a pioneer in the BPO sector in South Africa. I think, Duncan, you brought in Project Swordfish, if I remember, a couple of the biggies. Can you expand on that briefly?
Well, it started actually captive with Guardian National when we put the first direct insurance business in Sandton in '95. Mm-hmm. Then the merchant years, I won't take credit for bringing AOL. That was august people that you will all know well, such as Martin Dove and Andrew Briggs, but we certainly grew it in my time to well over 2,000 seats. At that time, focusing on international clients. We brought Asda in, I remember. Mercedes, Chrysler, which part of the Daimler arena, I think, and focused on domestic for the first time, and were very successful building, I think it was well over 1,500 seats, for example, for Vodacom. So yes, very happy years.
No stranger to our shores and no stranger to our industry as well. And currently, as a consultant, networker, strategist, business broker, I'm led to believe you've been responsible for bringing significant volumes of BPO work into South Africa. Without mentioning trade names or brands, are you able to expand on that slightly?
Yeah, I ended up back in Australia in the late 2009-10 period, and Australia had been a Johnny-come-lately to South Africa. I think at that time really only IINet. Which was at Merchants, of course. And then I always felt that South Africa would provide an alternative to the Indias and Philippines of this world, which I was also working. So since then, a lot of household top 50 Australian brands, the likes of Coles, Simply Energy, Hollards, which is, of course, is a South African institution, but trades here in Australia, we handle that. And quite a few other brands that are well recognized. Foxtel is probably the other largest Australian, the cable TV company.
Excellent. And I think we really move now into this lessons from the lockdown. So the world, according to Duncan Wallace, in November, December, January, BPO, we were looking at fairly vibrant expectations. Brief overview of the way you saw the world pre-COVID.
Well, we were very buoyant. I mean, we always maintained somewhere in the region of 1,500 to 2,000 live seats in South Africa in one shape, form or another. And over the last 18 months, I'd seen that America was very much getting open for business again as far as South Africa was concerned. And I know a number of our colleagues in various partners have had great success in that regard. And I think that was indicative of the end of the last big crisis, which was GFC, of course. And at a time when we were peaking in the 2,000, 3,000 mark with American seats in the back end of 2007-8, and you mentioned AOL, by 2009, America was off the map as far as South Africa was concerned. And I think it very much stayed that way until the mid-2015 type of mark, by which time they got their house in order. The economy was starting to boom. Unemployment was very low and kept going lower. So if you look even, what is it now? It seems like a lifetime, but let's say 3 months back, when I was last in New York, the unemployment rate for New York State, I think, was 2.1%. And overall, nationally, it was only 2.9%. So basically, lack of resource if you're looking for growth. So we saw America as a very, very big opportunity and been working hard in that arena for the last 18 months. And all of those opportunities were supposed to come to fruition as we got to sort of this time of the year. with many visits planned and one thing and another. So if I look at the buoyancy and the confidence we were looking forward to consummating 18 months of hard yards as we came into 2020, I have to say most of that has dissipated. And if I talk in terms of, we all know the impact of the lockdown, and I have to say I thought the BPESA team and collectively as an industry did a tremendous job with getting, the recognition as an essential service, not just for domestic support, but also for their international clients, because that is the lifeblood really of our industry as we move forward. So disappointing on one hand that there were a few hiccups along the way, but where South Africa did come out as a shining light was that it kept open. I won't say at 100%, but it kept open for business largely. Right. And that has been, I'll make no bones about it, a USP that we've been able to present as we start to talk about exit strategies with various clients and new clients with regards to what was happening in other locations such as India and the Philippines. And the good thing that hopefully the hard work has not disappeared is that at least we've maintained contact with all of those hot prospects that are saying that they are now seriously considering South Africa as a destination when for many years that wasn't the case. And I just like to think this is a bump in the road, and maybe it impacts us for 6 to 12 months, but we fully intend to be in prime position with all of those guys, and we're continuing conversations with them, helping them with their thoughts as they move forward into what now looks like 2021. We'll just give the year 2020 a scrap, and I'm happy with that because I've got a big birthday coming up and I can hopefully reset the clock.
Control, Alt, Delete,
yes.
Restart. With the lockdowns happening elsewhere across the world, and with your clients who are operating here in South Africa, or the work that you've been instrumental in bringing into South Africa, let's talk briefly about disaster recovery and business continuity plans. My take on it is that very few operations actually had a pandemic of this nature on the radar. But I'd really be interested in your views on that.
I think the term pandemic is certainly true. Sadly, I don't think they had any consideration for any type of crisis. And on the whole, I think that DRP globally is very low down, or has been low down on the agenda of corporates. It's interesting, obviously we look at trends in the marketplace, and particularly around, I go back a long time in the industry, and I can remember when email was coming through, and that was going to be the death of voice. And then, of course, more recently, we've got digital constructs coming through, and that's going to be the death of voice. And I think, as always, opportunities arise, and it's a matter of blends. I mean, there was a term for a while that captured the phrase omni-channel. Let's give our customers multiple choice of channels as to how they wish to deal with us. And that was the sort of vanguard of what people called was self-management. And I've got various, comments around that, which will take far too long at the moment. But the DRP thing was always a mystery to me. So it was one of the things actually we did with merchants in the mid-2000s in the UK, and we created a warm site where companies could have access to our spare capacity, literally as a turnkey operation. And they paid, I can't remember what the rates were, let's say £200 a month to keep that seat available to them. So I think, talking about opportunities, that would be an opportunity. I'd be suggesting to people that they add that to their sort of toolkit. But if I look at DRP more recently, and where I was getting frustrated was around robotics. So the one thing we do know about robotics is that it's virtual, as is digital generally. So I am aware of companies in Australia in particular, for example, a simple process such as invoicing. For reasons kept to themselves, it's considered as a high data protect areas. So they hadn't made any provision to be able to virtually conduct that work. Whereas, of course, if the robotics had been deployed, and it was one of the big selling points that we've always put forward about robotics, is that it is a very important tool for business continuity. Forget about recovery, it allows you to continue business. So my own view, and I think I share it with you, was that the thought leadership around what disaster recovery planning can look like in today's world, and this is even pre-COVID, was very, very thin on the ground. Now, what we are seeing in the conversations with our clients and other knowledge leadership we're providing in the arena is DRP is now top of the list, certainly equal first to home working, for example. That's the other strategic element that people are looking at. So, you know, the toolkit that we have at our disposal now around DRP, high digital penetration, and, you know, just management of geolocations. So, for example, as I'm sure many people listening to the call, one of my concerns was, is this the death knell to offshoring? And certainly corporates are taking the opportunity to repatriate, let's term it that way. However, it's not really a repatriation at the exclusion of geolocation, because geolocation now becomes a very important part of DRP. And if DRP is their number one concern going forward, then you have to have multiple locations to escape to. So what I do think is that there will be a rebalancing of the books. I think too many eggs have been put into too few baskets. And I think that, sadly, some locations will see a diminution of their footprint. You know, I am concerned, and I've got very many friends and business in the Philippines, for example, the impact of Metro Manila closing as dramatically as it did without any prior warning or notice has caused them all types of concern. Now, as a result, it's taken a while for them to get back on their feet, and many haven't from Manila. So many thousands of jobs are at risk. So I think the geolocation positive for South Africa, for example, is that, and certainly the large corporates we're talking to are going to be looking at a multiple enterprise, and it's certainly something that I'm familiar with. It was how AOL, for example, used to operate. I know a lot of the big American telcos operate that way and have multiple locations so they can balance the risk. The big problem, of course, with this risk is that the globe is affected by it. So it's unique in that respect. However, there are parts of the world, we know, Africa being one of them, that has suffered less for whatever reason than others. So it can help you flex accordingly. So I think that's one of the big lessons coming through.
So as we head towards wrap up on this one, it's really your view of the future. Difficult for anybody to look into a crystal ball that doesn't exist. But BPO, GBS going forward on a global basis, and then maybe a spin on how you see the potential for South Africa's BPO sector going forward into whenever post-COVID is.
Yeah. Look, I wrote a paper in conjunction with PwC just a few days ago for a client, and you know, I listed my sort of top areas that they will have to be thinking about. We've mentioned DRP. Alongside that is undoubtedly all of them will have an increased push towards self-serve solution and an emphasis on digital. And I think more will look at the whole automation processing arena around AI and so on and so forth. But I do think that voice will still have a part to play, because there is an emotional attachment to voice that people mustn't forget. And even though a lot of corporates, I think, will try and push more and more down the self-managed line, there is still that emotional connection between two human beings having a conversation. So voice, again, will not be dead. A number of conversations I've had is, oh, well, we'll just have voice for highly complex calls. And because emotion doesn't come into it, whether it's high complex or just bulk standard calls, I still think there's opportunity in that voice arena. As I mentioned earlier, the multiple geolocations to mitigate future risk is key. I think we will start to see increased levels of home workers, and certainly as a piece of advice for South Africa and Africa generally, is that upliftment of connectivity into more remote areas is going to be absolutely vital if South Africa is going to play a part within the home worker type of environment. I think because of the digital push, and I was already looking that way anyway, I think that niching South Africa in a highly skilled upliftment arena around digital prowess will take South Africa offshoring into being able to provide developers, analysts, and so on in that offshoring of digital type of arenas as well. And I think what's also going to be important is niching skills and verticals. So being able to show prowess of a particular skill, I mentioned digital analytics, or a vertical such as telehealth. And I've always been impressed with South Africa's ability in, I'll call it telehealth, but the discovery type of triage, contact agents, assisting big medical insurance companies around the world. Originally, they were, of course, partnered by Prudential. And I remember days gone by when I was talking to a qualified nurse in South Africa, and I think telehealth, the virtualization of doing business,
that's an
whether it's going to be an important area.
I'm quite sure this crisis and the reality of it will hone some of those skills and provide some experience credentials going forward. So not all doom and gloom. I'm reading you as a prophet of opportunity, perhaps, going forward. Any last words or messages of goodwill to our BPO community, not only in South Africa, but globally?
Oh, look, I think the message of goodwill goes globally to everybody on the planet. We are literally all as one as this one. You know, for the optimist in me says the world will become a closer community as we share these experiences, you know, in any great times of trial and tribulation. So I'm encouraged by that. In terms of our industry, and it's what I finish with my presentations that I hold, is I said, no matter which channel or solution you're providing, always, the umbrella to which we must sit under is that of customer expectations. So don't just create something in isolation from what we believe to be the way out of CV19 without understanding what that customer expectation needs to be. And I think brand management is going to be a very important aspect of the process moving forward, because I think some brands have dealt dreadfully with this crisis, and others, and I won't name and shame them at the moment, and others have dealt with it very, very well. And that's as a market of one in my personal experiences.
Well, I think your credentials as a strategist, those are wise words, and I think there are a lot of future directions we've got to start looking at exactly as you laid it out there. So thank you, Duncan Wallace. Thank you very much for your time, and
it's always good to talk to you, right?
Stay well and stay safe.
Yep, and keep well, everybody. Bye now.